In the 13th century, Italian merchants carrying infected rats spread the plague along trade routes. The Black Plague swept through Europe from 1348 through 1351, killing an estimated 2/3 of the population. The Black Plague followed a period of overpopulation and shortage of food in Europe. Although it is said to have ended in 1351, the epidemic continued to appear throughout Europe. It was spread by physical contact and respiration. Many intellectual people were not equipped to combat this crisis. People began proclaiming that it was a divine scourge to punish the people for their sins. Flagellation became a popular practice that involved individuals beating themselves with rods as penance of sins. Trapped and with no answers, people began placing blame on the Jews. They believed that the Jews had been poisoning the wells, so Jews were killed by the thousands, mostly being burned alive. A contemporary chronicles account about the cremation of the Jews of Strasbourg in 1349 wrote,
Jews throughout the world were reviled and accused in all lands of having caused it through the poison which they are said to have put into the water in the wells. Jews were burned all the way from the Mediterranean into Germany.
On July 6, 1348, Pope Clement VI created a papal bull to protect the Jews from prosecution. The 100 Years' War began when English King Edward III took claim of the French throne after French King Charles IV had died without a male heir. England and France were emergent territorial powers in too close proximity to one another. Edward was a vassal of Philip VI, holding French territories as fiefs. England and France also quarreled over control of Flanders, which was a French fief but was subject to political influence from England because main imports of cloth depended on supplies of imported English wool. This turned war into a struggle for national identity and for control of territory. Control and power became a main issue between the Pope and the King. By the issuing of Clericis Laosus, hospitalities between Boniface and Philip began.
The spiritual powers excel any earthly ones in dignity and nobility. We ought the more openly to confess in proportion as spiritual things excel temporal ones.
She was a heretic and a criminal. Gods! Gods, get him!
You will pay for this!
Pope Boniface excommunicated Philip and his chief minister, Guillaume de Nogaret, in 1303. Nogaret led an army and killed Pope Boniface while he was on retreat in Anagni.
Well-known humanists of the Renaissance include Francisco Petrarch, who was an Italian scholar and poet, and one of the earliest humanists, Dante Alighieri, who was a major Italian poet of the Middle Ages, Giovanni Boccaccio, an Italian author and poet, and he also was a friend, student, and correspondent of Petrarch, and Leonardo da Vinci, a true Renaissance man. He was a painter, sculptor, architect, musician, scientist, mathematician, engineer, inventor, anatomist, geologist, cartographer, botanist, and writer. Some of Leonardo da Vinci's most famous works was the Mona Lisa, painted from 1503 to 1505, and the Last Supper, painted from 1495 to 1498. Christopher Columbus set sail in 1492, seeking a better and shorter route to India for trade and riches. King Ferdinand V and Queen Isabella I, rulers of Spain, financed Columbus's voyage because they thought it could severely boost Spain's economy. Any land founded was to be claimed for Spain. Where Columbus landed, he believed to be India, but it was really the Americas. Interestingly, Columbus mistakenly called the indigenous people Indians, and the name stuck. Columbus's first voyage marked the beginning of more than 3 centuries of a vast Spanish empire in the Americas.
In this land, for Spain For Spain!
Martin Luther wrote his 95 Thesis in 1517. In it, he protests against clerical abuse such as the sale of indulgences. Indulgences were sold by the church and were remissions of temporal punishment due by sins. Luther, posting his 95 Thesis, created an internal division between Protestants and Catholics. The clergy were exempt from many secular laws and taxes, while remaining powerful landowners. Princes, magistrates, and ordinary people resented traditional clerical rights and privileges. The Reformation created Lutheran, Zwinglian, Anabaptist, Spiritualist, Anglican, and Calvinist versions of the biblical religion.
My letter to Cranmer. You prejudiciously judge. This is in this confused state of the church. No remedy more appropriate can be applied than that pious and resolute men, exercised in the school of God, should meet against themselves. Those who are not the professed enemies in the gospel are even now affected by that impudence, which will shortly, unless counteracted, produce among us what shameful confusion.
Yes, John!
The Catholic Church around the 16th century became a bit more spiritually flexible. The laity was now permitted experimentation with proven spiritual practice. After the Reformation, pluralism steadily became a fact of Western religious life.
From 1568 to 1648, the 80 Years' War, or Dutch War of Independence, was an ongoing internal struggle of France.
April 13, 1598 in France, Henry IV's famous Edict of Nantes proclaimed a formal religious settlement.
It brought peace by recognizing Calvinist Protestants of France,
Also known as Huguenots, basic religious and civil freedoms, and recognizing their towns and territories. We declare all those who make or shall make professions of the said reformed religion to be capable of holding and exercising all estates, dignities, offices, public charges whatsoever, royal, seigneurial, or cities of our kingdoms, countries, lands, and lordships under our obedience. The assassination of Henry IV.
The edict aimed primarily to end the long-running distributive French wars of religion.
These wars lasted from 1562 to 1568, primarily fought between the French Catholics and Protestant Huguenots. Later in 1609, the 12 Years' Truce initially guaranteed the departure of the Spanish, which brought peace and sovereignty to the Netherlands. In 1648, the Peace of Westphalia, a series of peace treaties, officially ended the 80 Years' War from 1568 to 1648 between Spain and the Dutch Republic. In 1587, Mary, Queen of Scots, is beheaded after 18 years of imprisonment at Fotheringay Castle in England for her complicity in a plot to murder Queen Elizabeth I. In 1588, England won the Armada, which was an invasion of the Spanish fleet against England under the command of the Duke of Medina Sidonia, Alonso Perez de Guzman.
Both of these events ended the conflict between England and Spain, with the removal of the Spanish threat to England's sovereignty in politics and religion.
In the Holy Roman Empire, peace came with the reaffirmation of the political principle of the Peace of Augsburg in 1555.
It was a treaty between Charles V and the forces of the Schmalkaldic League, which officially ended the political struggle between the two groups. Europe at mid-century had real, if brief, peace.
By the middle 1700s, many European powers were not united, sharing little in common. Instead of being nation-states, they were monarchies. Many problems arose between the monarchs and the nobility. Monarchs tried to make their power greater than that of the nobility, while the nobility tried to do the same to the monarchs. Generally, the monarch won this battle. New military and diplomatic power can cause problems for foreign affairs. One conflict was the rivalry control of the overseas trade between Great Britain and France. These two powers fought over French attempts to dominate in Europe. This occurred during the reign of Louis XIV. Throughout the 18th century, they would battle for control of trade. Another conflict took place with Prussia and Austria. They were fighting for the leadership of German states. Many of these conflicts caused Europe's society to change during the 18th century. Aside from the advantages that the entry of a greater quantity of cash into the kingdom will produce, it is certain that, thanks to the manufacturers, 1 million people who now languish in idleness will be able to earn a living. An equally considerable number will earn their living by navigation and in the seaports. These, in my opinion, are the goals that should be the aim of the king's effort and of his goodness and love for his people. The almost infinite increase in the number of friendships will multiply to the same degree the greatness and power of the state. Jean-Baptiste Colbert, in his Memorandum on Trade, 1644.
These economic and social developments would eventually transform the life of Europeans. Parallel to that economic advance, Europeans came to have new knowledge and understanding of nature and life.